to move that the House take note of a matter of urgent public importance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I so move. Mr. Speaker, there was once a time in our country where a child who lost their parent could rely on the state to provide a safety net so that they wouldn't fall through the cracks.
That's right.
Where a child whose parents lost their jobs could turn up to the local wins and be treated with respect, have dignity, and be asked questions. How can we help you get into work? There was once a time in this country where a government would help their people get into their first home and continue to build social housing so that those who didn't have a home could have access to a roof over their heads. There was once a time in this country where evidence, science, data would drive decisions by a government to ensure...
The Honourable Chris Hipkins.
Bishop, sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Speaker...
We'll start again, shall we?
Mr. Speaker, you have granted an urgent debate on the government's economic half-year economic and fiscal update. We are now 1 minute into the member who requested the urgent debate, and we've had a lot of talk about children, or one particular child, but HYEFU has yet to be mentioned. So it's a bit strange that we're now enduring a general debate speech with 2 days to go left in the year when we're meant to be having a debate about HYEFU. We're prepared to debate it. The member seems unprepared to actually address the issues.
Yeah, well, that I consider to be a pretty unhelpful point of order. I was watching the clock. The member will come to a point very, very quickly, but I suspect that she was setting up the points that she wants to make about the HYEFU, which is not unreasonable from someone who is getting to move a debate.
Thank
the
you,
Honourable
Mr.
Barbara Emmons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Economics is about people.
Because it's all about people. Every single number in the HYEFU is about decisions that impact people, that impact communities, that impact organisations, that impact businesses in our country. There was once a time in our country where social service providers could depend on government funding to serve communities where the government could not reach. There was once a time where oranga tamariki service providers could care for vulnerable children because they knew that funding was coming down to the line. They knew that when time was going to be tough, there would be a government to serve them. There was once a time in our country where governments made decisions, took responsibility for them, and paved a vision and a future for our country that served everyone, not just their mates in the tobacco companies, not just their mates who are landlords, not just their mates who are getting far higher remuneration than minimum wage earners. Mr. Speaker, with the release of the half-yearly fiscal update and the budget policy statement, it's very clear that those days are over. Mr. Speaker, let me run the House through the numbers. Net core Crown debt will peak at 46.5%. Net core Crown debt will now be 3.5% higher than what was forecast in the budget. $58.7 billion more debt, peaking at $235 billion than what was forecast at budget. The economy is shrinking. It is predicted to be $20 billion smaller in 2028. The $19 billion higher net core Crown debt will be higher than what was in the Minister of Finance's budget. If it wasn't clear, Mr. Speaker, I am pretty sure it is crystal clear now that this government is borrowing for the groceries, is borrowing for tax cuts, and has made deliberate choices to make it hard on every single body except for their mates. They are giving with one hand, with tax relief, the minister will crow. But on the other hand, they have reduced the subsidies for public transport funding. It's going to be more expensive for our kids to catch the train or the bus. And the Minister of Finance is asking, what's the relevance of this? And that's the problem. That is the problem. She is so removed from the connection of her decisions to people in our community, to the families who have to put their children on rail or buses, from the families who have to depend on their schools to pay for their lunches, for the ratepayers who depend on a government to support them with water infrastructure, to spread out the debt across the generations to help them so that this generation is not crippled with that debt. That is what fiscal prudency is about. But again, that side of the House fails to connect. This document with numbers is all about people. Now, Mr. Speaker, I will hear the same spin I have heard for the last year from this government. We will hear the same spin that this is we inherited a mess. Well, you know what? We take responsibility for our spending that saved lives, that ensured families and employees stay connected to their workers. We take responsibility for that because 20,000 people did not die because of those decisions. We take responsibility for the infrastructure spend that we had to do, which I note many government MPs across the House have been present at to either cut a ribbon or to put a shovel in the ground. And I get it, right? I get it. I get the infrastructure spending through COVID to fix fire stations across the country were needed. Fire stations help meet the needs of communities. So I welcomed those government MPs last year when I was cutting the ribbon because I knew the importance to the community. I knew the importance to people. And Mr. Speaker, what really, really grates me is this particular sentence in the budget policy statement on page 3. Second, savings will need to be found beyond those already identified in the previous budget. And third, with a small number of exceptions, government departments should expect to receive no additional funding in the budget. And yes, the Minister of Finance says, but it's choices. We told the Minister of Finance that the tax cuts were unaffordable. We told the Minister of Finance that that was absolutely irresponsible. But she still gave the tax cuts. She borrowed more for the tax cuts. And as a result, she has taken away, with the other hand, she has ripped away that relief by making it harder for families to access relief for early childhood education, by making it harder for families for public transport subsidies, for removing universal prescription fees, for ensuring that they're not putting downward pressure on rents, by giving tax breaks for landlords. This side of the House did have interest deductibility, but it was for the build of new houses. It was to incentivise the building of new houses. But what do we see from the other side of the House? And this is what I need to warn New Zealanders of. Every single MP, when you go to your community, you will need to go eye to eye with these social service providers who are dealing with more homeless people, who are dealing with more people who cannot make their everyday budget because of decisions made by this government. But instead of helping those families being able to access their entitlements, this government has just made it worse. Dashboards, performance indicators. What about these people's entitlements? They've lost their jobs because it's quite clear in HYEFU that this government has no plan to help the economy grow. And that's why the numbers reflect that. That's why our economy is shrinking. So no matter how much this government likes to say productivity will get us out of here, I'm still waiting for that plan. Has anyone seen that plan? Anyone seen that plan? Anyone seen the plan to build infrastructure? I've seen plans for potholes. I've seen plans for potholes, but what I haven't seen is a vision, a plan for our country. All we've seen is cuts, but then handing out free relief to their mates. taking away from everyday New Zealanders in order to pass the buck on to them another way. We are having more New Zealanders almost every 5 minutes leave this country because they don't see any hope. We are seeing grandchildren leaving this country because they will get paid better over the ditch. They will get better work conditions. They will have people that will fight for them. There will be infrastructure projects that are happening. Instead, we have 12,000 fewer construction sector workers because this government, based on these numbers, based on more cuts to come, will not be building houses. They will not be helping to repair our schools that need repair. They will not be helping to ensure that our infrastructure and our construction sector workers stay here, because you need that pipeline. You cannot just wish a pipeline of builders, plumbers and sparkies. And that's why we are having net record migration from our green shores, because this government is failing New Zealand with no plan and no vision for the future.